Good morning, all, and welcome to History with R&R Live. How are you doing this morning, Jeff?
I'm doing pretty well, Robert. How are you, sir?
Alive, kicking, and woke up on the right side of the dirt. All right, with that,
That's always good.
we have our special guest this morning, Mexican Ironman. How are we doing this morning, sir?
It's awesome that the first three guys you called couldn't make it, and you still had room for me. So great.
Let's take a quick spin through chat here. We have Kapla, Bird of Prey 5, John DeMarco. Good morning, Mrs. Canuck. Welcome, my love. And Pat S., welcome. Mountains of Elysium, welcome. And this morning, we brought Mexican Ironman on for a little chit-chat, so I'll let Mexican Ironman introduce his topic that he would like to talk about, and then we'll go from there.
Yes, I'm Mexican. I'd like to talk about what it's like to be in Texas, which is awesome. No, I'm kidding. That's not today's topic at all.
Well, Texas is awesome.
But Texas is awesome. I mean, we've had, before I get into the topic of the day, I'm out here in Dallas, Texas, where I was joined by Derek the Derelict, Nick from Echo Base Network, Stone Loki from the Loki's Mornings of Mischief. We went to a RetroCon this weekend. We've been doing all kinds of great stuff in Dallas. We went out to the range. Boy, do you guys have ranges out here in Texas. Holy moly.
Oh, tell me about it.
Yes, we had a great time. I brought my stuff, my gear that I had from South Carolina, flew it out here. Brought my Chihuahua Bambino for the trip. So tax season ended for me on October 17th. So it's been a great vacation. And I've met Nick before briefly, but I never met Loki in person and never met Daryl in person. So it's great to meet people in person that you become so close friends with over the internet. You know, it's absolutely amazing. I can't wait to get up to Canada and see you, Canuck. I mean, I literally once things ease up and things get back to normal, I'm going to find a way to spend 2 or 3 weeks. I'm going to hit every major Canadian city because so many of the great friends we have on YouTube are Canadian.
Yes,
from all over your great country. So,
well, yeah. Unless they're from Quebec, then we just kind of, that's like our little stepbrother that we kind of tolerate.
Well, that's another topic for another day,
that's
maybe.
A totally different topic.
It's fascinating that you say that because I actually can't think of a single person I've met on YouTube from Quebec that I
like. Unfortunately, I have. Anyway,
well, when I was contacted, when you guys reached out to me and said, is there a topic of history to talk about? Well, one place that I was literally at ground zero was I was on 9/11. I was in New York City in downtown Lower Manhattan, and I was within naked eye shot and sight of everything that happened that morning, and had one hell of a harrowing. Well, I'll just say it's an emotional experience, and it covered a lot of bases of emotion actually being there. And there's things that I saw and things I experienced that to this day I've only rarely ever heard talked about or seen on any kind of video. I thought I could share that a little bit later in the broadcast as well, and maybe set the sights for how it happened and what I saw from being literally at ground zero on the way out. I don't know, where do you want to start, or how do you want to...
Well, we can talk about, 9/11 to this day is something that I think it'll go down just like Pearl Harbor did. Because it was, it's an attack on American soil. And in the Western world, for the most part, we're not used to that. We're used to sending troops somewhere, but we're not used to it coming home. That's, in Europe, it's more prevalent for, something to happen over there than it is for to happen here. We're usually reacting to something that's happened over there. Things don't make it across the Atlantic for some reason. However, that day it did, just as it did at Pearl. And I know for a fact one of our members of our chat, Bird of Prey 5, was also there in Manhattan.
He spoke about that recently on our show.
Yes, on the day. So little did you know that you were in the same area as Bird of Prey 5 at that time. But yes,
Well, little did I know we would later become brothers and find each other on the internet, and that's what one of the great things about humanity is that sometimes people are brought together with common experiences. I love Bird of Prey. He's a great brother of this entire, not just your channel, but many channels in this whole community. He's absolutely a, literally like the founding concrete of so much of what's happened, on YouTube and so many great channels. So hail to Bird of Prey. Love you, brother.
absolutely. So I'll let you kind of go wherever you want to start, and we'll go
All
from
right.
there.
Well, let's start with what took me out there. So at the time I was married um, to my ex-wife Eva, and she went to Yale. I went to Stanford, and she had a. We would always go to each other's reunions, and as each of our other friends got married, we would go. So she had a friend of hers, and she was going to be in the wedding. I wasn't in the wedding, but she was going to be in the wedding. And so I accompanied her, and we went up to that, and that was somewhere in the Connecticut, somewhere on the border of Connecticut and New York. And we flew up there. I believe it was Wednesday. We went to the reunion at Yale. Boy, that was an experience. I never met so many fancy pants people in my life. I mean, even though I went to a school like Stanford, it wasn't very fancy pants in the sense of like I've never really experienced the whole New England, Northeastern, yippity yippity kind of lifestyle life. And it was a very interesting experience. Culturally, it was a very intimidating experience. I was a young lad I was a lot younger, obviously, than I am now because this is 2000, this is 9/11, right? So, anyway, so I went back into Manhattan. We were actually supposed to fly out on Friday. Friday night. She wanted to see the sights and sounds and of things of New York. So we did that on that Saturday and Sunday and changed our plane reservations. And the morning of, we were getting ready, and we were like literally the way where we were staying at my friend's place. He was a trader for Citibank. He traded foreign exchange currencies. His name was Zach, and we stayed at his place. He stayed at his girlfriend's. He gave us use of his place. So he had an apartment. He lived in Southampton, but he had an apartment that he kept in Lower Manhattan at Wall Street because he worked on Wall Street and as a trader. Now, he had just recently been transferred and promoted to the Citibank desk for foreign exchange currencies that was located in one of the towers just the week before. And
Okay.
and because we came into town, he ended up staying out with us late Sunday. The whole weekend, Friday, Saturday. I mean, the whole weekend we stayed out late. The whole weekend, he ended up calling in sick and taking the day off. I didn't know that at the time. So let me go back to okay. So that morning, so we're getting ready to go, and my wife had come out of the shower, and she was drying off and all that stuff. I went in to take a shower. I heard her scream from the living room, which was right next to the master bedroom and bathroom area. I heard her scream. That's where the big TV was at, and I came running outside because I thought something came wrong. I mean, she like shrilled, like glass breaking shrill scream, and I came running out, and I said, "What's the matter? What's the matter?" First words that are out of her mouth is that we're under terrorist attack. And I look at the screen. I see smoking. I see the building. I see one of the towers, and I'm like, wait, what? And she says we're under terrorist attack. And then I'm watching the TV, and it says that a plane accidentally. The first flashes were that a plane accidentally. There was talking about equipment malfunction that had accidentally. That wasn't the first reaction that a lot of TV stations had. That a lot of TV stations had. And so, because when you go back and watch the tapes, the coverage, a lot of the coverage that they pick up is right when the second plane hits and all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
But the very first news, the local TV news reactions were that something happened to a plane and it hit the tower. And that was long before anything else, came up, and we knew that there were other planes, and long before the Pentagon, all that other stuff. So I said, no, it's probably just an accident. someone, I said, it's probably just an equipment malfunction or an accident. And she says, no way. She says, someone flew that thing into that building deliberately. She says, we're under attack. And I looked at her, and the thing about my ex-wife, who I don't talk to anymore, but I mean, if we ran into each other on the street, we'd be cool. I mean, we divorced under real, as friends and parted ways as friends. But she always had this. She always had, and sometimes women are like this. Sometimes they just know stuff that they shouldn't know, but they just do. Sometimes that's in our favor. Sometimes it's not. But whether it's they just do. There's some women that just have this sixth sense type of thing, and she had that about other things in life. There was another time where we were supposed to get on a train, and that train ended up being involved in a collision. It was an Amtrak train years before that. And she said, we're not getting on this train. I'm like, why not? She says, we're just not. It's not going to be safe. I'm like, what are you talking about? And we got a fight. And later there was so her sixth sense kicked in, and she said, we're under attack. And she says, we better get out of the city. We're not safe. And I looked at her and I said, we're in New York City. I looked at her and I said, are you kidding me? I said, we're in America. Like all of my dad was a Marine. He didn't allow me to go into the service, like literally didn't allow me to go into the service. He said I didn't shoot well enough and I get myself killed. But it's kind of a family joke. I mean, now I shoot a lot better, but but he's right. I couldn't hit, let's just say I couldn't hit the broadside of a barn with a tortilla launcher. You know what I mean? Okay, so anyway, so I looked at her and I said, are you out of your mind? I said, first of all, we're in America. Second of all, we're in New York City. And third of all, we're in Manhattan. I'm like, we're in the financial epicenter of the planet. So there's nothing that's going to happen to us here. I'm like, they don't even allow like people to carry guns in New York.
Yeah.
And I'm laughing at her, and a tear just rolls down her cheek. I'll never forget this. Like one tear just fell down her cheek, and she just said, please. And normally we would fight with each other,
Yeah.
as couples do. And I looked at her and I saw that tear go down. I said, all right, let's go. And so we grabbed our shit, packed as fast as possible, got downstairs. I said, you know what, let's just take a cab to the airport. I actually had a cell phone. I had one of those brick cell phones way back in the day.
Yeah.
The gray, thick brick cell phones. Not the older ones from the 90s, but it was pretty thick. It was one of the Motorola thick ones, and I had a Skynet pager and all that shit. But anyway, so
right.
I'm trying to make a call, and automatically there's no service, like zero service at all. And so I'm like, okay. So I go to local payphone. They still had payphones in New York in 2001. And I'm like, okay, wait, that's not going to work because I couldn't find one on the block we're on. So then I'm like, okay, now what? So I said, you know what? Let's just find a cab and let's just go to the airport and let's just do this. So I held down a cab, and by the time we got downstairs and we're calling for a cab, I look up and I can see like from the blocks away, the second building gets hit. Bam! You know what I mean? Like, we went fast. Like, we grabbed our bags and we were gone, and we were downstairs waiting for a cab. We look up, boom! And then she turns to look at me. She grabs me by the arm. She says, "I told you." She says, "I don't care about any of our luggage. We have to get out of here." And she said, "I'm like, what do you want to do?" She's like, "I want to run." And I'm like, "We're in Manhattan. We can't run." So I get the phone. I start calling. I pull out. I was a frequent traveler of everything. So I used to carry around a separate wallet that just had all my frequent traveler membership cards. Remember back in the olden days, you would actually get a Hertz, a National Car Rental card, and you'd have a Hertz card, and you'd have an American Airlines card for frequent travel. I had all of those. I had like 20 of them because I traveled probably about 60, 70,000 air miles a year at the time for the job that I had. So I'm putting them up, and I'm going one by one, and I'm trying to find. So I can't get through to the airline. And then when the cab guy come up, I missed this part of the story. I told the cab guy I want to go to the airport, and he says, we can't go to the airport. They're closing all the tunnels. They're sealing off New York.
Ooh.
And I said, what are you talking about? He says, the airports are being closed. I can't take you to the airport because I won't be able to drop you off. And I'm listening to him on the radio because these are pre-Uber days, right? I mean, he actually has a radio in the cab, and he says, I can drop you off at the exit, but you're not going to be able to get to the airport. I said, all right, go. So I gave him a tip. I had him $20 at the time. I said, go. And I hit the back of the car and I sent him on his way. Slammed the door. Boom. I said, go. And so then I started hitting the phones, and I had Avis, nothing. I'm going through all my things, and then I find Hertz Rental Car, which I'm a premium club member, and they said that we have one car left, and because I realized what was happening is that everybody's trying to get off the island. Everybody's heading to the
Right.
subways. Everybody, like you can see, literally people. And I didn't get hit with the dust when the buildings fell. The way we were positioned is we were in Lower Manhattan, yes, and but we had enough buildings so that when the towers fell, like we didn't get any of that. But anyway, so let me just tell you what happened. So what happened is that I ended up finding one rental car. And the lady at Hertz, she says, you're gonna go to this location at this corner and this corner. I think it was, shit, where was it? It was way down on 7th or 6th Ave. I can't remember. But anyway, so I told my wife, I said, stay with the bags, I'm going. And at the time, I was a younger, thinner, better looking version of me now. But I was a triathlete at the time. And I could run, like really run. So I took off. I ran 13 blocks while things were going to hell in a handbasket, downtown. And I got the last
Right.
rental car. I got the last rental car that Hertz had anywhere on the island, and probably the last rental car that was available for anyone on that island, because I had tried every single service, and I had them all. Thrifty, and all those, all the enterprise, all the iterations of all the different rental car companies. Anyway, so I got the last car. There were 5 people there waiting for me not to show up, because they said that if I wasn't there by, I can't remember what time it was, but whatever the time they gave me, that they were going to give up my rental car. So I just took off running full throttle, and I got there and I got the car and I got back. So once I picked her up, however, I mean, one of the things, let me do a timeout here before I talk about how I got off the island. There's a couple of things that I'm going to remember like vividly about that experience. And one of those things that I remember vividly is that there were jets that were flying up and down the avenues in Manhattan. And I don't recall seeing a whole lot of news coverage or of this scene, but they were like literal. I don't know if they were F-14s or F-16s. I don't know what the hell they were. They were loud, and they were flying through Manhattan up and down the avenues. So there's got to
Never
be.
heard that before.
Well, I've never seen the footage, and so to this day, it may have just been because I was on Lower Manhattan by the. But we were more towards the water. We were like 2 blocks off of the water, and it may have been because of that. But I absolutely did see it, and it was thunderous. The other thing that I experienced, which I haven't heard too many talk about, I've heard a little bit of it, but not a lot of people talk about, is to this day, I still remember the smell, because I was close enough to smell what I was smelling, and it was, building, rubber, concrete, people, paper. There's a smell that I've never smelled it since, but I would recognize it today, and I don't ever want to smell it again. And it was awful. It was the scent of death, of destruction. It was. I mean, I don't know. When I see some of these old clips and tapes of we just did the Band of Brothers retrospective that Pat S. was the executive producer for, and Kenneth, you were on it, and so many.
Yes,
of us
it
on
was a
YouTube.
really, really good experience. Yeah.
It was a fantastic experience, and when I was going back and rewatching that, those episodes, it made me think of what these guys. There's an experience that we're not getting. There's the visual experience, there's a physical experience, and then there's with the physical experience comes not just what your eye see, but what your body smells, and and the sense of New York that day was horrific, and it brings great sadness and heaviness in my heart even just talking about it, and I don't talk about it very often. It's a tough thing to talk about. It was a tough day, and it was a tough experience. And another thing too is being there and hearing the chills and the screams of terror from people that were running away. See, there are people that were running away from the actual buildings. I was removed, like I was about 5-6 blocks away, northward, and so I could see everything that was happening. But by the time everything, I wasn't like literally in that quarter-mile circumference, which was true ground zero, right? And so like where the cloud, we didn't see the video of the cloud dust coming and all that stuff. but to hear the people crying around you, to see the looks on people's faces, just hear the wailing, people walking around saying, there were people walking around saying, have you seen someone that looks like this? And which is, it's a ridiculous thing to think about, someone pulling a picture out of their wallet and running up
Yeah.
to a stranger and asking. But that happened all the time, all over their downtown. It was happening all over the place. And part of you was like, oh, I wish I could see that person. I wish I did see that person. How would you even recognize it? I mean, there's some people walking around with concrete powder on their face. You don't know anybody. It's New York. I mean, good God, I've been in New York with my family of 10 people before, and we would lose each other in the group that we were in. Like just walking, at Christmas time, and to see people with this horrified look on their face, saying, have you seen so and so, or have you seen this person? I'm looking for this person, and just walking. Oh God, it was awful. And so anyway, so let me just go back to how we got off the island. So the bridges were closed. They announced that on the radio, the regular radio, they announced that they were going to open up. They were announcing what subways, like they say, the Lincoln Tunnel's closing. Then they announced that they were going to open up the Washington Bridge. So we had the car, but we couldn't get off the island because the island got sealed off. I don't know if you guys remember that in some of the news reels, but so they sealed off the island completely. No one in, no one out. Well, what they ended up doing is they were announcing on the radio that there would be certain access points would be open. And they announced that the Washington Bridge would be open for like 2 hours. I think it was a 2-hour span. I think it was between 8 and 10 or something like that. Or was it between 10 and midnight that day? In any case, we got in line. It was mostly a lot of semi-trucks, which I'm not sure why, but there's just a lot of, like, not semi-trucks, what do you call those? A lot of delivery trucks, a lot of vans, and some cars. But see, most people didn't. It's really weird to me. Like, I don't know where all the cars were, but when we got over that bridge, we were one of the only actual cars that got the bridge, and we were, I think, 5th or 6th last vehicle off that island that day. Because right after we went across, they sealed it and they closed it off again. And so we got on the 95, listening to the radio of what was happening, and we stayed awake the entire way. So from the Washington Bridge, we literally drove. I did most of the driving because my wife was just absolutely emotionally fried. I was too, but I think I was actually, in Canuck, something happened to me last year. You remember I broke my leg, right? I got in that accident. You heard I broke my leg, right? So I broke the leg, and for about a good hour, I didn't feel any pain, and I now know it was because I was in shock. Right?
Yeah.
Well, I think I went into some kind of mental shock.
Yeah.
What happened that day, because we crossed that bridge in New York, and guys, Jeff, maybe I don't know if you've ever heard of this, because I've never really thought about this, so I'm talking about it now. But Jeff, so we crossed the bridge, and I drove all the way to Miami. Like she only drove like 30, 45 minutes, like part of the way. I drove all the way straight down. And that's a long ass haul. To go from New York straight to Miami, which is where we lived at the time.
That's a long drive. And
I got to tell you, because we're hearing stuff of what happened to the Pentagon, and then we heard about that other plane. They were broadcasting news about that on the radio, because we're in the car, so everything we're hearing is on the radio, not on TV. Until we got to Florida, I don't think we felt safe, and until we got to our house in Florida, I don't think we felt 100% safe, because for all we knew, the whole country was under attack.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It was definitely a crazy day for sure, and with the multiple targets, multiple hits, Pentagon, the towers. I remember up here, it wasn't as insane, but I remember, like, it was you couldn't turn on a TV without it being about New York. Or the Pentagon, or there was talks of, the borders closing. There was talks of, and then that went away. And then, our airport is being shut down because it's basically being turned into a parking lot. Vancouver, the same thing. Calgary, Toronto, all the major international airports in Canada basically got turned into parking lots. So there wasn't any planes going out, but all the planes were coming in. The overflow from the United States. And then there were people, like going, well, why the hell are we taking the planes? Kind of deal. And then, so that was the biggest point of contention at that point was, well, why are we taking them? Kind of thing. But yeah, it was a very crazy day. And, the minute the second plane hit, I called one of my friends who's in the reserve, who's at the reserve in the reserve at the time. And I says, well, buddy, because we had gone out drinking the weekend before. I said, I'm glad we got to have a few beers before you deploy. And he's like, wow, it's in the States. Sure enough, within 3 days, he was called back to base.
Yeah.
Like,
well, it inspired me to want to go and serve my country. And I went and had a meeting with my dad, who was alive at the time. And he said, absolutely not. There's no way. I mean, I was barely 30, so I was wasn't exactly a spring chicken.
No.
In terms of, volunteering for service. But, I mean, he was just absolutely livid. He says, you're not going. He did 3 tours voluntarily in Vietnam. And he comes from a family of 32 Marines, and he drew the line at me and my brother that we were absolutely not going in any way, shape, or form, even reserve, which I wanted to do reserve. But I'll tell you this much: I never wanted to be a good American as much as I did after that. It really put me on a pace where I felt, and not just American in the classic sense of like United States American. I mean Western free world. I mean freedom of thought, freedom of speech, freedom to self-responsibility. I mean, to me, these are values that to do the Band of Brothers thing recently is a reminder of why of what's important in life. Because most of human history hasn't had freedom. What do we have in particular in North America more so than what even they have in some places in Europe. I mean, we're freer. We're freer in the States. As many things as you guys got going on in Canada, you're still freer in Canada and the United States than a lot of people are in certain European countries, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And Australia now too.
Oh, Jesus. Jesus.
That's another topic.
Yeah,
that's another topic for another day.
Nightmare.
I have some really good friends that I've made in Australia, and I just don't understand. I don't understand.
They took the whole go big or go home thing way too much to heart.
Many years later, I went back. So I've been back to New York a few times since obviously 9/11 for work or whatnot, and I had to come to terms with something that I had to realize that I was avoiding going back downtown and seeing the memorial. Like I always had a convenient excuse. Like it was always on my list, guys, but it never happened. And I had to realize this. There was another trip, and this was just a few years ago, maybe 4 years ago. I was with my sister, who said, we're going to go. And I said, well, there's so many things we got to do. She says, well, we're going to do the Statue of Liberty thing. It's right there. It's downtown because the ferries to see that I promised her when she was a little girl, I would take her in New York and we would go see the Statue of Liberty and do the whole Ellis Island thing and all that. Well, we actually did do the trip because we had planned it. And so then she's like, no, we're going. And then she said to me, what are you avoiding? And I said to her, I'm like, I'm not avoiding anything. She's like, yeah, you are. I know you. You're avoiding this. Why? She's like, have you never gone and all these times you keep going to New York for business? And I'm like, no. And she says, oh, okay. She says, okay, no, we're going to go there and we're going to do that first tomorrow. And then I'm going to go see the Statue of Liberty like my brother promised me to. But we're going to go do this because you've got to go do this for you. And I looked at her and I said, okay, fine. I mean, you can't tell your little sister no.
No.
Because she's like, she's like 10 years younger than me. So when I was 20, she was still a little kid. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And she's still a little kid to me. So she basically said, no, we're going to go do this. And I'm taking you, and you're not going to make an excuse because you're taking me to Statue of Liberty and Ellis Island to not go and see this. She said, we're going. And I did. And I've been a better man since I went back. Much better man in many ways. So, I don't know.
So now I gotta ask, what car did they give you to get out of New York? It's the last car. It's definitely not going to be a Grand Prix.
It was
Malibu? Well, at least you got out in style.
Oh, it was okay. I had cloth seats. It had a radio that worked. Yeah, Chevy.
At least they didn't give you a Prius.
I don't know. Did they have Priuses back then? I don't
No.
think so.
No, they didn't.
But they did. They did have those little. What were they? They could have given you a Dodge Neon, which really wouldn't have got you very far.
Good God, and Dodge Neon is a lunch pail, bro.
You're probably going to look upon me negatively now, Robert, because I drive a Prius.
You see, that's what you get, Canuck. Talking smack there.
That's okay. We'll just find out where you left your balls, and we'll pick them up somewhere. But anyway,
I'll have to go back and check and listen to the show for Bird of Prey. I missed that, but I'll listen to it today for sure. So I'll have to go back and listen to his experience.
He was on the 13th of September.
Yeah.
Okay. Sweet. That was that's my tax deadline. That was my tax. No wonder I missed the show, but I'll catch it today for sure.
Yeah. So, I mean, just thinking about, they're seeing it on TV and then they're seeing it in real life. And I mean, it's too, like you said, it's very different. I mean, you get sound bites, but you don't have that constant sounds, and the cameras aren't going to pick up everything. They're just not. They're going to pick up what's going to get them clicks, views. Well, they were probably told not to do that.
Well, that's what I was about to suggest. I mean, the only reason I can come up with as to why in the hell there's not footage of that is they must have been blacked out. They must have been told not to film it because,
yeah.
I don't know. I mean, here's the other thing too is that I saw at least a couple. I don't know if they ever had video or ever showed it, but there were armed carriers for sure in Manhattan. I don't know if they ever showed videos of that.
No, probably not. Yeah, probably not.
I saw those going up and down 7th, 6th Ave on the long avenues because New York, the way it goes is the streets are east-west, and the big, the avenues go up and down. So, but I was, I'm being really quick and doing it in 15 minutes, but but you bring up an interesting point, Canuck, which is that I was there all day. I didn't get off the island until they opened the Washington Bridge at night. So from 8:30 in the morning or whatever time it was sometime between 8 and 9. I remember that this stuff. It was like right in the morning that all this stuff happened. I was there for 12 hours. 12 hours. Okay.
Why did they open the bridge?
I'm not sure. Well, I know that I had to show that my driver's license that I was a Florida resident. So I think I'm not sure why they opened it. I can't remember, but I remember they said they were going to open the bridge. And I know that I showed the guy at the checkpoint that I was a Florida resident and I had a rental car, and then he let me off the island with that. I don't know. I really don't know exactly why, but they did open, but there was only the Washington Bridge. So I'm in downtown, and I don't know if you know how New York's laid out. So the Washington Bridge is way at the other end of this motherfucker. I'm sorry to curse. I'm sorry. And way at the other end of the because I got to go all the way from downtown Lower Manhattan all the way up. And by the way, that was an experience because there's traffic, there's, streets are closed off, there's barricade, so getting up there took a while. So as soon as we found out that they were going to open it, I think that was around dinner time, and we found that out. And then we drove up there to get in line. But dude, I mean, I've talked about this experience in only 15, 20 minutes, but I'll say two things. I'll add two things. One is that I experienced this for 12 freaking hours in downtown. And,
Yeah.
and you see a lot in 10 to 12 hours. I mean, 2 hours in the car driving north up to the Washington Bridge. The rest of the time, we're sitting there next to the rental car outside. Because once we left my friend's apartment, Zach, we closed the door in that auto lock. We left the keys inside and closed it. That was his instructions. So we couldn't go back inside and hang out. So we're sitting there on the street all day long, all afternoon long. Part of it was sucked up by me trying to get that rental car, which took a couple hours. But then we're there all day long experiencing this stuff. And a couple things is that I'll say is that, or add on to this discussion, is when you guys see these clips, it's like, I'm sure the reaction for the average person is, oh my God, this is horrifying, and oh, it's so awful. All right, well, then the clip ends after 30 seconds. Maybe you watch a 1 hour or 2 hour movie special about it, maybe. Okay? But you know what? You weren't there.
Yeah.
And as horrific as it might feel, and I don't mean this I'm not trying to be hostile. I'm just trying to express make a dramatic point. I don't really watch a lot of that stuff because it's all numb to me. And the reason why it's very numbing to me is that the experience that I had having lived through it is far more impactful than anything I've ever seen.
Yeah.
I mean, there's been some amazing in-depth like the documentary where they interview some of the people that were in the building. That's a little bit different. I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about the retrospectives where they interview the horrifying experiences of, say, a fireman or that have made it or something like that. Those are the personal things. I'm not talking about that stuff. That stuff is absolutely impactful and profound and amazing. I'm talking about when you see videos of what happened, like to the city, the buildings and all this stuff. To me, all of that stuff is. Hold on one second, guys.
Yeah.
We have Pat S. in the chat saying, in retrospect, he should have stayed in the hotel. And I'm wondering why you say that, Pat.
I wasn't in a hotel. I was at my friend's apartment.
Yeah.
Okay, well, stay at the apartment.
Because my wife, as I explained things, my wife wanted to leave. She said, we're under attack.
Yeah, there's no arguing once.
No, I understand that. I'm asking Pat why Pat thinks that.
It would have been safer.
Well, it was what don't was get being, me wrong.
It's what they wanted everybody to do. Hunker down, right. Stay put, get off the roads, clear the way. 1 for the medical crews, 2 for the military, and less people out, less people they have to deal with, and they can just do what they got to do. So I remember at the time they were like, just stay put, stay safe, avoid this, avoid that, and
Well, that you bring up an interesting point, because on the radio, if they hadn't opened the reason why we didn't drive anywhere is we couldn't go anywhere, and so until they opened up a bridge, that's when we left. Now, as far as leaving my friend's apartment, see, once she said that she wanted to go, we just grabbed the bags, went down, and we were going to get in the taxi cab and go to the airport. Once we left the apartment, we couldn't get back in because he had a condo, and we left the keys inside on the ashtray, and just not the ashtray, the little, those little. He had this little black thing. It looks like an ashtray, but he uses it for keys and shit. And then we locked the door. And once we locked the door just sealed behind us, and we were out. I know because I tried to get back in later. So, see if I had the door open. But it wasn't, being out on the street for such a long period of time. Being out on the street for such a long period of time is you got to experience a lot, see a lot, feel a lot, smell a lot, and when I see these clips of what happened on that day in the city, don't get me wrong. I mean, look, there's that clip of where someone leaves a building, drops out of a building. Well, I saw that live. I saw a lot of that live.
Yeah.
So seeing it and knowing that it's real life after the fact can never have the same impact on me as when I was there. I look up with my own eyeballs and I see this happening. Like, it wasn't just one person here, one person there. There were a lot of people, okay? And then you had to and then, and there's a lot of stuff leaving that building. And then when the buildings crumbled and fell, the smoldering ash of it all that just covered the city, I couldn't get that smell out of my sinuses for like days, and I wasn't
Yeah.
even in
I
ground zero.
imagine.
Okay, I wasn't even like, I didn't go into the building like the firefighters, the brave men and women did. I was just in the region, but that soot permeated the air. In the Bay Area, when I lived in California, we had a lot of fog, and it's, you breathe that fog in, and it has a certain air to it. Well, the soot covered the city. It was just everywhere. You didn't have to get engulfed by that cloud right when the buildings fell in order to smell it. It was in my nasal cavity for days. It may have even been a week until it went away. But even then, it was so much like inside my brain, like that to this day, if I were to smell it again, I would instantly recognize it. I would say that's the smell of 9/11.
Yeah.
Like it's still vividly in my head. I can't really place it, but it's like a combination of things, and it's not. I mean, look, I don't want to sound like a jerk about some of the videos that have been put out, but I'm really talking about the newscast reels. The little newscast clips.
Yeah.
And again, I was there on the ground for 10 hours, and when you're there for 10 hours in downtown on the sidewalk, then next to your rental car, which you've only had for a few hours, and you're waiting for hopefully a bridge to open, you see a lot. Just literally watching. I
Sure.
remember looking across the street and watching that same woman who was on my side of the street, but on the other side, holding up a picture, looking for some loved one. I can't even remember the name. I don't even know if it was a husband, a sister. There's just so much stuff. It was like being in a movie, being in a horror movie or an action horror movie, um, and I guess I was traumatized, Jeff and Robert. I
How
guess I
would you
was
not
because
be?
Yeah.
I guess I was traumatized, but I don't think I really realized how traumatized I was until I went back to the memorial
Yeah.
and had experienced the memorial, and then I found peace, and then it it really centered me, and I felt like everything's gonna be okay.
Yeah.
I don't know how,
Because
but
I
I
know,
just
I know, like because for my love of history, I end up watching a lot of vets talk, and that's something that even they say. It's like, yeah, you can see it on the screen, you can hear it on the screen, but watching, smelling those rounds go off, hearing them right next to your ear, you know, hearing the live sounds of combat is much different than whatever you could experience in any action movie possible. And a lot of times they can't put it into words. They can't describe it because it's undescribable. It's that uh, it's that it. There's you know it to see it, but you can't quite put your finger on the right words to say or the right way to describe it because
Well, I
there's
don't
just
think
no way
somebody could.
to describe it.
Yeah, I don't think anybody could understand that unless they experience it themselves.
Yeah.
Jeff,
Yeah.
and Jeff, you know what I think? Like in Robert, like thinking about this thing, this experience. I think one of the things that was so traumatizing about it was the sheer feeling of helplessness. That as an
Yeah.
American, I couldn't do anything. I not meaning that I couldn't run off the island or get away, but I really didn't want to either. I mean, yeah, my wife wanted to go and we wanted to be safe, but as the news was released and as the developments of the day came to light, I then got a burning anger like a fire inside of me that I just couldn't quell. And that is why when we got back, I called my dad and I said, Dad, I want to go join the reserves. I want to enlist. I said, I know I'm a little bit older. I think I was 28 or something like that at the time. I wasn't quite as young. And we had already had this discussion, by the way, me and my pop, because
Yeah.
when I was in high school, we didn't have an ROTC program, but I wanted to transfer to a high school that did, and he wouldn't allow me to do that. He said, if you do it, I'll never speak to you again. I mean, of course, I'm a kid. I actually think that would have happened. Now I'm a grown man. I know that wouldn't have happened. I mean, he was just saying that, I guess. But he
Yeah.
meant it, so I didn't do that. Then when I got to Stanford, they actually had to, despite Stanford being on the left coast, they actually have a fairly strong, the Hoover institution's there, and they have a very robust ROTC program, or did at the time. I don't know if they still do. But I tried doing it again in college, and he put his foot down again. So no, so here I come again now. It's after 9/11, And I said, Dad, I'm going to do this. He said, and now his health isn't, his health isn't what it was and stuff. And he says, look, I don't know how many years of my life I have, but I don't want to lose you before I've lost the last years I have of my life.
Yeah.
And that got me, and him saying that got me to do it. But Jeff and Robert, I got to tell you guys, I felt being there on the island, watching this happen to your country live in real time in New York. I was angry, and I think I carried that anger with me for a long, long, long time. And maybe that's why in my work life, I'm trying to connect the dots here because I'm talking about this for the first time. I've never talked about this topic for as long as we've talked about it, except with my ex-wife.
Yeah.
By the way, okay, so this is a big deal for me, and I told Jeff when we booked me that I said I don't know if I can do this, but I'll be ready and I'll do my best. I think
you're doing great.
Maybe why in my work life I chose to go into business for myself, and I decided I wanted to in my business help small business people be successful because I didn't know any other way I can help my country. Since my dad wouldn't let me join the service, I think I basically said, okay, I'm going to live a life of service since I can't be in the service. And and when I went back to the memorial, I felt a renewed commitment. That's so many years, those years ago. What was it? 5 years ago now? Yeah. When I went back to the memorial and I was there again, it reinvigorated me. And I said, hey, recommit to a life of living a life of service for other people and try to help other people when you can, where you can, how you can, if you can. I mean, some days you can't. I mean, we're only human, But it's an impactful day. And I agree with you. The way you started this show is you said it's going to go down like the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. And I think you're right. At least it has for me.
Yeah, it definitely will. And it got the same reaction. It's one of those few times where our borders were breached. And that doesn't happen often. And so it's more, it's really impactful when it happens here, whether it's in the States, Canada, even London to some degree, but more so on this side of the Atlantic because, throughout history, for the most part, everything is over there. Yeah. Whether over there means, Europe or Japan or China or Russia or Germany, it's over there. It's over there. It's never over here.
Yeah, right. It's so rare here.
So for us, there's a lot more of how dare you, because it doesn't happen here, and when it does happen here, it's even more of a shock. I think
it's one of those rare times when we all become unified. I think
it is. Yeah. Then all of a sudden, I know coming out of that, it was, you wouldn't hear any questions. Canada is sending troops. Yep. There was no, normally when you hear Canada is sending troops, it's like you could walk down the street and you'll get 5 people that'll say, yeah, we should go. And there's 5 people that'll say, hell no. We're peacekeepers. We're not military. What the hell? Right. There was none of that for for at least 6 months after. There was none of that. There was no, well, we shouldn't send troops. What are you doing? There was no talk like that for at least 6 months to a year. But it was, so for me, that was a change up here, because up here, military intervention is something we don't do very often. And when we do it, it's there's a lot of tradition, there's a lot of history that goes behind it, and it's just different. It's a different feel when Canada goes to war. It's a different feel, and most of the time, I mean, if you go back pre-39, if Canada was going to war, it was because Britain decided that they didn't like somebody. World War I, World War II. We just kind of went, well, all right, I guess we're following them into war. So, this was one of the first times that Canada was like, yeah, no, we're going. And it was it was just crazy. And I know a couple of my family went over. I know a couple of my friends went over. I mean, we joke about it now. Canadian military, the only people that can go to Afghanistan and build 2 Tim Hortons. But we joke about it now. But at the time, it was no joke. It was all hands on deck.
No, as Arwin Avalon says in the chat, Canada and the U.S. truly united, the whole West united.
Yes. Well, I want to thank Mexican Ironman for his time and for sharing his story with us.
We appreciate you coming on.
We greatly appreciate it.
And thank you for telling us something so personal, something that you have not gone in detail with very many people. We appreciate that.
So with that, I'm going to ask Mexican Ironman, is there anything you'd like to promote or anything you'd like to say as we wrap things up?
No, I mean, promote everybody on YouTube. Promote them. I mean, promote each other and be kind and love each other. That's and make sure we appreciate what we have every day, because
absolutely,
it's all fleeting.
All right, with that, folks, I want to thank everyone in chat that was here. I hope you were able to follow Mexican Ironman in his story. I want to thank everyone in chat. I hope you all enjoyed today. And once again, we thank Mexican Ironman for joining us and for sharing his story. And with that, as a dear friend of mine would say, thank you and good night.